The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome to Optimum Solutions webinar about fluctuating work week as an alternative method of overtime calculation. My name is Susan Warren, and I'll be your presenter today, and Sherry Dwyer is also with us while we talk to you about fluctuating work week and how you might use this as an alternative method of overtime calculation. Here's our agenda for the day. We'll talk about some pros and cons of using the fluctuating workweek method. We'll talk about the hard and fast rules, which include that employees must work fluctuating hours, that employees must be paid a fixed salary and what that really means, that the employee's pay rate must be at least minimum wage, that overtime hours are paid at 1/2 regular rate for the week and what that means, and salary is for all hours worked, not for a specific number of hours. We'll discuss exactly what the Department of Labor means by that. Now, when I talk about pros and cons of the fluctuating workweek method, I'll start out by saying this. It's complicated. And yes, that's a pro and it's a con. Paying overtime at time and a half has become the norm, and everybody understands that. It's easy for employees to understand, nothing up my sleeve, no magic. That is, it's easy to understand until you get to the employer's job of financial planning. When you're trying to guess how much overtime you'll have to pay out during your busy season and budget around that, the fluctuating workweek method for overtime calculation becomes very attractive to employers, especially when you have a lot of employees whose jobs don't fit neatly into a nice 40-hour work week. But it's not the standard time and a half that everyone understands. So it can be complicated to explain to employees, complicated for them to understand. And as you'll see later on, when you look at isolated work weeks, it can even appear like it's unfair. So I'll go out on a limb here and say that you just don't hear too much about fluctuating work week as an alternative method for calculating overtime because it's got sort of a bad reputation, and employers tend to shy away from it because it seems complicated. Here are the basic mechanics. Employers can budget more easily because they can plan around fixed weekly salaries, one of the basic tenets of the fluctuating workweek rule. Any overtime for employees who work fluctuating work weeks will be paid at 1/2 their regular rate. So the employee is still getting straight time plus half time for hours worked over 40. We'll do the math a little later on. However, over long periods of time, the fluctuating workweek method essentially reduces overtime costs because it encourages efficiency, and employers like this. If an employee knows that he or she will make a fixed salary if they work 30 hours or 40 hours, chances are they'll get their work done more quickly. The Department of Labor is very quick to point out that fluctuating work week is not an exception to the regular overtime rule, but rather it is an alternative calculation. So here we go with doing the math. If you do the math, the employer only pays 1/3 of the additional amount owed for hours worked over 40 in a week, 1/2 of the regular rate of pay in addition to straight time. And since that regular rate of pay changes every week based on the total number of hours worked, the employer's cost of overtime is lower when there are more overtime hours worked. If you are on the receiving end, the employee working the overtime hours, sometimes it seems that fluctuating work week results in less overtime pay when you are working more overtime hours. But you have to look at the big picture and remember that when you work fewer than 40 hours in a week, fluctuating work week will guarantee you a fixed salary no matter how many or how few hours you worked. The Department of Labor has very strict rules that employers must follow in order to qualify for the fluctuating workweek method. First, the employees must truly work fluctuating hours. Schedules can be set up in patterns with different set hours each week, or schedules can be unpredictable or variable, but the hours must be fluctuating. So let's look at an example here. Jane has a fixed schedule that repeats in a pattern. One week she works 48 hours, the next week 52 hours, then 60 hours, then 72 hours. That is a fluctuating work week schedule. Even though the pattern repeats, her employer can use the fluctuating work week method to calculate her overtime. Now here's another example. John's schedule is not so well defined, but he's always scheduled for more than 40 hours a week. We're going to come back to Jane and John and use them in some calculations later. The Department of Labor's next rule is that fluctuating workweek employees must be paid a fixed salary. No matter how many hours the employee works in a week, they earn the same fixed salary. That salary is not allowed to be changed by variables like shift premium or reductions for absences. It can't even be changed for things like merit-based bonuses. If the employer does not comply with the fixed salary rule, the employer risks jeopardizing compliance with the law. Let's look back at Jane, whose schedule rotates through a 4-week pattern of different hours each week. She has a fixed salary of $700 a week, no matter how many hours she works during the week. So you can see that her regular rate of pay will be different for each week. If she works 48 hours a week, her regular rate of pay is $14.58. 52 hours, her regular rate $13.46. 60, $11.66. 72, a regular rate of $9.72. Because her regular rate of pay is different for each week, her overtime rate is lower the more hours she works. You can see that her half-time rate diminishes the more hours she works in a week. So when she works 72 hours in a week, her half-time rate is only $4.86 compared to $7.29 when she works 48 hours in a week. And John, whose schedule is not definitely set, would work the same way. He makes a fixed salary of $670 a week, no matter how many hours he works, and his regular rate of pay is determined by his $670 salary divided by the number of hours he works in a week, whether that's 41 hours or 72 hours. Another rule of the fluctuating workweek method is that the salary paid must be high enough so that the employee's regular rate of pay is at least minimum wage, which right now is $7.25 per hour. So, if we look back at Jane and the week when she's scheduled for the most hours of 72, her $700 salary divided by 72 hours gives her a regular rate of pay of $9.72. So she's fine. She fits that rule. She is making at least minimum wage. And you do the same for John. At a salary of $600 a week, you divide that by minimum wage, John would have to work over 92 hours in a week before he fell below minimum wage. So hopefully that's not going to happen to John. That fixed salary per week must remain fixed. It cannot change under any circumstances, and the Department of Labor is a stickler on this rule. Remember when I said this was complicated? Keep in mind that you will have to explain this to your employees. They will receive a fixed salary no matter how many hours they work in a week. That fixed salary is considered compensation for all hours worked. That is the straight time. Overtime hours, or hours worked over 40 in a week, are paid at 1/2 the employee's regular rate of pay for the week. Payment of the salary is compensation at the regular rate of pay for all hours worked in a week, including overtime hours. That is the, quote, time, or straight time, for all hours worked. Even hours over 40 are paid in the fixed salary as part of the straight time. What the employer owes the employee for the hours over 40 is the 1/2 regular rate for those hours. And here's an example. Jane makes $700 a week, and when she works 52 hours, her regular rate is 700 divided by 52, or $13.46. Half of that is $6.73. So 52 hours minus 40 gives her 12 hours of overtime at $6.73 each. That's $80.76 for her overtime, added to her salary of $700. For this week, she makes $780.76. Now, let's compare this fluctuating work week method to a traditional overtime calculation. Without fluctuating work week, Jane would make $17.50 an hour. That's $700 divided by 40. And if she worked 52 hours, she would get 52 times $17.50, that's her time, and then half time, 12 overtime hours times half of $17.50 is $875, or $105 for her overtime premium. $910 plus $105 is a total compensation of $1,015. Compare that to her fluctuating work week salary of $780.76. So isolate this one work week, and it looks like with fluctuating work week calculation, Jane is making less. But remember that I said you have to look at the big picture. So even on a week where Jane only worked 20 hours, she would still make $700. You have to tell your employees they have to look at the big picture. Let's do the same thing with John and look at a couple of work weeks for him. John makes $670 a week. He's got an unpredictable schedule. One week he happens to just work 24 hours. He still makes $670 because he's on fluctuating work week. But a traditional calculation for him would be a regular rate of pay, $16.75 per hour times 24. He'd only make $402 instead of $670. One week he works 50 hours. Fluctuating work week, he's got $13.40 times half. He's going to make at $670 for his halftime rate. For his overtime hours of 10, each at $670. That's his salary of $670 plus his overtime premium of $67. His fluctuating work week pay would be $737. Now compare that to a traditional calculation of $16.75 times 50 hours for $837 plus an overtime calculation of $83.75 for a total pay of $921.25 compared to his fluctuating work week total pay of $737. Looks like traditional calculation is paying him a lot more than the fluctuating work week. But you add these 2 weeks together at fluctuating work week, he's earning a total of $1,407 for the 2 weeks with fluctuating work week. And at traditional calculation, he's earning less because that week where he only worked 24 hours, he still made that $670. The fluctuating work week can be to the advantage of the employee when they work fewer hours. The fixed salary is for all hours worked, not for a specific number of hours. So for that reason, when you explain this to your employees, don't even mention a number of hours at all. Make sure your employees clearly understand that you are using the fluctuating workweek method for the calculation of their overtime. And the best way to communicate this to them is with a written policy. And remember, it's complicated. When you try to explain it in a conversation to someone asking questions, it's easy to get tripped up and say something misleading or even wrong. Put the policy in writing and have employees sign that they have received your written policy. They do not have to sign that they agree to it or even that they like it. They just have to say that they received your explanation and that they understand what you've explained. One of the best reasons to never use specific numbers when you outline your policy is that those numbers are very likely to change. Jane may work this repeating pattern in 2018, but in 2019, those numbers may be completely different. Make sure your policy states, first, the fixed salary will be compensation for however many hours the employee works in a week. And the fixed salary will not increase just because more hours are worked. And any hours worked over 40 in a week will be paid at 1/2 the regular rate for that week. The fluctuating workweek method normally applies to salary non-exempt employees. You typically think of those as your hourly employees. They're getting hourly rates. But keep in mind that you could have exempt salary employees who might entertain thoughts of misclassification claims. They might file claims saying that they are due overtime. So it's very important that you make sure that your job descriptions are in line with the work that is actually being performed. If you intend to pay someone a fixed salary as their only compensation, no matter how many hours they work, you should state that in a letter of intent to hire or a signing contract. But get that in writing so that they can't come back at you with a misclassification claim, and make sure that the duties that they perform are in line with the job description. It may be complicated, but you can make it work to everyone's advantage. The key to a successful fluctuating workweek policy is a clear mutual understanding between all of the parties involved. And you will see this wording if you go to the Department of Labor website, clear mutual understanding. They want you to make sure that that is happening between you and the employees. And before you go too far, check your state laws. California, for example, does not recognize or allow fluctuating workweek as an alternative overtime calculation method. And there may be other states. So always check your state laws and make sure that this is going to be permitted in the states where you pay. If you want to learn more about the Department of Labor's regulations related to compliance with fluctuating workweek, you can visit this website. It is the Department of Labor, DOL.gov, and it's the Wage and Hour Division website. They have regulations that explain the compliance. You might want to jot that down. This webinar is being recorded, and you'll be able to view this on demand later. We'll post this on our YouTube channel. We'd like to thank you for joining us today. We hope you've learned some tips about fluctuating workweek as an alternative method of overtime calculation. Please be on the lookout for more of our educational webinars. If you have any suggestions for topics that you'd like to see, please email me or give us a call, reach out to your support rep or someone at Optimum Solutions. And we hope you have an optimum day. Thanks for joining us.